Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Figured we'd give some time for more people to come and join,
And we are recording this, right, Danny?
Yes, we are.
So so people should be aware, that this is being recorded.
Yeah, that's a good point. It did say that, but just to make sure that everybody is aware that, yes, we are recording because this is intended. Um, we are hoping that will live on. So if you want to access it at a later time, you can always come back to it. We're just waiting on one panelist, and then we'll go ahead and get started once she joins.
Hi, I'm here, Danny, just in
Oh,
case.
oh,
Yeah,
I sorry, go because it says iPhone, so I
I know
didn't.
it does. Yes. But I'm
Oh,
here.
okay, all right. So it's 4:03. We'll just go ahead and get started. Um, no use in delaying any further. So hold on, one more person wants to come in. All right, she made it just in time.
I'll handle the admit for the meeting
Okay.
so you don't get disturbed.
All right. Well, thank you, Santiago. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this very special panel discussion titled Cracking the Code, Successful Residency Interview. My name is Danny Jimenez. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. I'm also the president-elect of the American Society of Hispanic Psychiatry, and I'm very, very thrilled to be moderating today's discussion. Before we dive in, I do want to, for those that are just joining us, we are recording this, just so you all are aware. This is meant to live on, so you yourself can come back to it, but also if you know peers and anyone else who was not able to make it, you know, uh, please share this with them, or it'll be on our website actually. So I do want to encourage all of you in the audience to submit your questions through the chat. I really hope that this feels like a conversation rather than just a strict lecture, um, as much as a conversation as Zoom will allow. But this is meant for you, so please be active, be engaged, let us know what is on your mind. Um, Full disclosure, I'm a clinical psychologist. So while I went through a similar process for my internship, the applications, the interviews, the match, there are certainly key differences from what you as med students are about to experience as you go through your own residency interview and residency journey. So please don't hold back. Please ask any and all questions, make any comments that you feel will help you navigate this process better. And so now I'm going to turn it over to our amazing panelists. I'm going to call on each of you as you appear on my screen. So I want you to introduce yourself, say your name, your position, where you went to medical school, and where you did your residency. So we'll start with Mauricio. You're first up on my.
Oh, Mauricio Tohen, currently chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of New Mexico. And I like to call myself a student in bipolar disorder because every day I learn more about it. So, grew up in Mexico City, attended UNAM, the oldest university in North America. And then I did my residency in Toronto. and then I did some other training. Pleasure to be here.
Wow. I did not know that you went to UNAM. So next up, Gustavo.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm Gustavo Angarita. I am an assistant professor of psychiatry at Yale University. I did medical school in Bogota at the Universidad Militar. In Bogota, I did psychiatry in New Haven at Yale, and I am a student of addictions.
Very good. Thank you. Vladimir?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bladimir Munoz. I'm a PGY2 at UT Southwestern. I'm doing the combined adult and child track there. I went to UTMB in Galveston for my medical school, and the last 2 years, I've been focused on helping applicants like yourself get familiar with the match process and also walking through a lot of people through the interview process, which is a pretty important part of the psychiatry application process. So happy to be here and so grateful to be part of this panel today.
Well, and thanks for sharing your perspective. Next up, Juliana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Juliana Gomez-Makhinson. I'm Colombian. I completed medical school in Colombia, Universidad CES. And I also did my residency training in Colombia in Universidad de Antioquia, where I lived and teach. I taught for many, many years there, like 15 years in Colombia. And then I transitioned and came to the US. I'm now associate professor at Harvard UCLA, Department of Psychiatry. I work as an FSP provider. I'm the medical director of the FSP Full Service Partnership Program, which is a program that is community-based and is basically designed to treat patients with major psychiatric disorders that face some challenges to receive normal care as usual. I'm involved right now in the process of interviewing applicants, reviewing applications. So I feel like I don't have much expertise as a program director here, but I was a program director in Colombia, but I'm now involved in this process actively. So I guess I can answer some of your questions. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Next up, Juan.
Okay, Juan Gallego. I'm a psychiatrist. Also did my medical school in Colombia in the same university that Juliana did it, Universidad CES. Did my residency in SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn. And after that, I joined the Sucker Hills Hospital, Northwell, where I've been practicing for all these sort of few years. Happy to be here. I typically get involved in the interview and research track residents mostly.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Juan. And then last up on our panelists is Maria.
You're muted.
You're still on mute, Maria.
You're driving, be careful.
All right. So, Maria, you're still on mute, but since you're driving,
Don't distract her, Daniel.
yeah, I'm not. I'm trying. I'm trying not to. All right. So we'll just move on. Maria, when she has a chance, she can just chime in when she can. I work with Maria here at the University of Miami. She's a newly associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry. And so it's really great to hear all of your experiences because I think you provide a wealth of knowledge from the perspective of an IMG and what it was like to come through the process and then also to make it in academia. So I think what you have to offer is extraordinary.
Danny,
So,
can I
yeah.
make another comment?
Sure.
I guess being I have to take care of the department, including who we train, and a key thing for us is workforce development here in New Mexico. So New Mexico, it is the most Hispanic state of any other in the country, not by numbers, but by percentage. In fact, the majority of us in New Mexico are Hispanics, some who've been here half a millennium, other recent immigrants like myself. And one of the things that we're doing is actually extending our residency. We have, of course, a residence here at the medical center, but we are extending to a rural residency, and it's going to be right by the border in Las Cruces, because our goal is to train psychiatrists, not only who are going to stay in Albuquerque or Santa Fe, but who are going to be in rural New Mexico. And most departments in the country, if not all, if they chose to only get U.S. graduates, they would do that. There's more graduates than positions. But I think what we need to keep in mind is that being born in the U.S., it doesn't necessarily mean that best than the rest of the world. So I think medical schools need to, or departments need to have a sense of the importance of bringing talents from other places. And since we have a large Hispanic population, training psychiatrists who understand the culture or have been through some of the challenges is very helpful. One of the things that we do here in our department is just to make sure that we get the right Hispanic residents, those who are committed to the community. There might be some that I want to do great research, which is great as well. But I can give that perspective from the point of view of training psychiatrists for a state like ours. Thanks, Danny.
Sure. And I'm glad you did that, Mauricio, because my next thing was gonna be to all the panelists. If there is something that you want to say, you don't have to wait for me to call on you. Just say what you need to say, just like Mauricio. And Mauricio, I was actually going to go to you first because I did want to ask you from a chair's perspective, what advice would you give applicants such as the ones that are here, and whether they're here doing med school here in the U.S. or whether they are IMGs? What advice would you give them in terms of how to go through this, how to navigate this process and all that stuff?
Sure. I think I would highlight how they will enrich our faculty. Of course, especially nowadays, we're going through very difficult times, and I'm not going to get into details for many reasons. But our communities, our minority communities, have more challenges now than what they had before, including medical coverage. Actually, New Mexico has been very fortunate that we've got very good rates in Medicaid. Unfortunately, now that Medicaid is being cut, we're going to be the ones suffering the most. So what I would advise candidates is to emphasize that their experience can be very helpful to better understand our populations. And many of the medical centers, including those in New York, have a large Hispanic community. That I would emphasize on that, and also the language, including telemedicine. Of course, we are the ones who do the most telemedicine, and being bilingual, I think, is very, very helpful. I would emphasize what we bring to the table rather than limitations that we might have. Danny.
And that's actually a really good point, because just speaking from a provider's perspective, the need is so great that it's just really, really great. And there's not a lot of us out there, and there's not a lot of us that actually speak Spanish. Certainly not enough to meet anywhere near enough to meet the demand. So it's a good point, Mauricio, to play up that strength and show that this is a very key that's an area that you can bring to the table that makes you unique. I now want to go to Bladimir, and since you recently went through this process, what advice would you give as a current resident? What advice would you give the applicants who are in a position that you were in just 2 years ago?
Yeah, I think when reflecting back on the application process and also kind of training people in the interview process as we're going through it last year and kind of starting this year as well. Um, I think one of the things that's really important for folks that are preparing for it is taking that next step from, knowing your answers very well. That's very important in kind of getting that muscle memory of your application and knowing what answers to answer. But you kind of want to start graduating from that point so you're not sounding like you're reading from a script. And that's where I see a lot of the kind of the next step is for a lot of applicants and learning how to know your application very well and having those maybe 6 or 7 key responses that can be applied to almost any question and knowing how to adapt to any question that comes. Because I think that's really the strongest factor when you're coming from an applicant going into the interview, knowing how to adjust to any question that you're going to get. Because you're always going to get the tell me about yourself, why psychiatry, tell me a difficult moment that you had. What do you like to do for fun? And so it's always kind of a variation of about like 6 or 7 different scenarios. And so if you know how to adapt yourself very well, I think that really helps to graduate from someone that knows how to respond to the questions well, but still sounding like you're reading from a script to someone that sounds very conversational. And that kind of leads me into the second point in terms of what really helps an applicant shine during an interview. Near the end of the interview season, a lot of things start to blend for the interviewer in terms of, who was applicant A, B, or C. Unless you're writing down what the responses were, it's kind of difficult to remember a few months down the line. And so I always tell people that it's not a lot of what the interviewer will remember is not really a lot of the kind of content, but also how you make the person feel. Because if you think about your conversations with people every day, you don't really remember all the nitty-gritty details to what they said, but you remember how they made you feel. And so if you can make that kind of impact on a person and they can reflect back on the interview with you and say, wow, that when I talked with that applicant, it was very natural, it was very conversational. The things that I found that are very helpful in terms of the making that kind of next step in the interview process is getting out of this comfort zone of I get the question and I give the answer and then I wait for the next question to give the answer. Sometimes people are going to give you reflective statements and say, wow, it sounds like you had a great experience when you were doing XYZ at the clinic. And some folks get very paralyzed by that scenario and they don't want to kind of respond and have a natural conversation. They'll say, oh, yes. And then they'll just kind of stay quiet and wait for the next question to come. So I would say start getting very comfortable with just having a natural conversation. If someone gives a reflective statement on what you just said, it's very okay to keep that as that conversation going. Say, yeah, that it was a very impactful experience for me. I really enjoyed doing XYZ. And if they want to keep the conversation going, just follow the interviewer's lead, or if they go into the next question, then you focus on that scenario. And so you really have to learn how to be adaptable, how to adjust, but also feel comfortable in just having a conversation with another person, and also being comfortable with showing your emotions. We also get very rigid and wanting to our answers to be very perfect, but for psychiatry especially, it's very powerful to be able to show your emotions. If something was really impactful for you, like let your face show it. Smile really big when you talk about why psychiatry. When I used to talk about my why psychiatry, I used to tell the interview, I walked away from the clinic day with goosebumps on my arms, and I called up my friend saying, like, I'm so excited to be able to have this experience. I can't wait to come back. And I would just make sure that my face was lighting up when I was telling that experience. I would look at the interviewer and they would be smiling really big because what you're showing on the screen is reflected back on the interviewer. So I think I would kind of remember to always show your emotions because at the end of the day, you want to seem like a human being and you want to be able to relate to the person across the screen.
And Vladimir, that's a really good point because I I interview med students and I also interview resident applicants for our department. And you're right, it's a slog for all of us, for the applicants as well as the interviewers, right? Because it's a long season and a lot of interviewers come, but and it could be very odd. It could be sort of very, I don't know, sort of generic, superficial, right? Because we have the questions and we have to ask the questions and this and that, but to really show the humanity for that to really come through is really good advice because that's what people remember, not just like the automaton that just said, what they thought was expected of them, but actually like engaged in conversation and let their personality shine. So to now switch gears a little bit to Juliana, when you are interviewing residency applicants, what do you look for?
Thank you, Danny. I was thinking of reflecting what Vladimir was saying, and I think I look for that spontaneity, that natural conversation, feeling at ease with the applicant, feeling that I want to know more about them and their motivation about going to psychiatry. I normally ask them how do they imagine their life as a psychiatrist, what type of psychiatry they imagine practicing in the future to see if there could be a good match with what we offer in our program. I also remember, I remember some more than others, and I think visibility is very important, and little details like some of these applicants send me an email, a thank you email after the interview, and they ask questions about me, and I think that's very interesting too. Like they're interested in you as an interviewer, and they ask interesting questions, and they ask questions about your journey, and I think those are the ones that I remember the most, the people who I really think have like a genuine interest in our program and in our faculty. And not just me, but in my program, which is a more like a community-based program, not so much academic, even though we're aligned with UCLA, we look for people who are resilient. So people who even have had difficult experiences, we like to hear about those, and we like to hear how did they cope with difficulties. We also like to know how do they deal with adversity. Like we work at a public hospital, and sometimes we have lack of resources, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of challenges, and I try to ask the applicants, how do you deal with adversity and having to deal with lack of resources, maybe not having some medications at some times, or the nurses are on strike, or things of that sort. And so yes, basically that's what I look for.
Okay. Yeah, just emphasizing the humanity of it, right? And to make it more of a conversation rather than this isn't a deposition, right? Like if you ask a yes or no question, yes, and then there's a more of it, but then there's also the back and forth. Gustavo, same question. What like when you are interviewing, what do you look for?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I would echo a lot of the things that Vladimir and Juliana said in terms of, I think that if the candidate is genuine, I think that's huge, because it's not about the answers that will fit what an interviewer wants to hear or what a program wants to hear necessarily. I think it is about what really resonates well with you as the candidate. Like if you want to do public psychiatry, then that's what you talk about. You don't have to convince anyone about doing something that is not generally resonating with you. So being genuine, I mean, this is also echoing things that Vladimir and Juliana said. Letting the interview flow is not a script. If you are having a conversation with the interviewer for 10, 15 minutes about soccer, keep it going. I mean, it's okay. I mean, because a lot of that is going to be how the interviewer felt in that conversation with you. And if they had a good time with you, at the end of the process, they're going to be connecting your face when they do the ranking, and they're like, "Oh, I remember we talked about soccer for 15 minutes." It's okay. It's a human interaction. So let the interview flow. It's not scripted. Um, and the other thing that I would say is, I think they know about your accomplishments, your productivity, everything that you have accomplished. So I don't worry too much about convincing anyone about the things that you have done. I mean, they look at that in your application. So it will be different if they say, "Oh, tell me about this paper or this." Then, I mean, but I will just be joining, and no need to convince them about how many papers you have or anything like that. I mean, they know that. That's why they invited you to the interview. Um, and yeah, just trying to, in as much as the interviewer is trying to have a good time with you, then it's also important about you having a good time, because this is a rewarding part of the process. You got it to that point, so it's trying to enjoy yourself as well. Yeah.
And then to slightly change it up a bit, Juan, can you share some of your experiences as an IMG? What are some lessons that you've learned? Some surprises, some things like I wish I knew then, like those sorts of things.
Sure. Thank you, Danny. So I guess you gotta be ready for many things, because sometimes not all interviews are the same. So some programs will throw some strange, they may do a test. So sometimes you do have to be ready for sort of a unique sort of a thing. So when I matched, the program where I matched, they had us watch a video clip of The Sopranos, for example. And then they asked us to analyze or provide our analysis, psychodynamic interpretation of a couple of the scenes on The Sopranos, right? So at that point, I just went crazy. I just came up with something, whatever. It came to mind, even though it didn't make a lot of sense, but it kind of showed that I was curious psychologically, that I wanted to connect the dots in a way, right? And the interesting thing is, right before that, I had an interview with a Russian psychiatrist, and then I remember talking about, he was asking me about, because he liked books a lot. So he asked me about, what book did you read recently? And then I say, "Oh, Anna Karenina." And they say, "Okay, yeah." And so then I confused the actual author of the book. And then I realized later, it's yourself. And so I thought to myself, I screwed up, that this is it. I'm done here in downstate. Nothing. But then I had the interview with the program director. Then I watched the Sopranos clip. So at the end, everything worked out. So I had sort of the worst and the best experience in the same program in the same day, right? So never sort of give up. People are different, and people have different opinions. Probably, even if I messed up, I guess maybe he was curious about what I said, et cetera, et cetera. So I think one has to be ready for all challenges, and keep it cool, to be genuine, as people said. And I think the more you show your true personality, the more chances I think you have of matching, because remember, this is a bunch of people. There's the Gaussian curve, if you all fall in the middle, nobody's going to remember you, right? So people only remember the extremes usually, right? And it's if you impact them emotionally, maybe you are very self-reflective, or you're very unique in your interactions, or you're impacted by the content. Maybe your analysis of your career has been very, great. So then maybe they remember that piece of you. So in this interview, you're gonna get a lot of cliche questions. So you don't want to give a cliche answer, because that's gonna throw you into being the unknown, right? So try to dig into yourself, try to be as much as you are, and trying to make it sort of reflect in the interview. So if you like public psychiatry, as somebody was saying, or if you like music, or always try to find your value and then make it sort of obvious during the interview. And hopefully that fits into the whole picture of doing psychiatry, right?
And I think, Juan, you bring up a really good point, that number one, nerves, right? Nerves are normal. That's part of being genuine, right? We get nervous. We are gonna flub an answer, and then maybe we're gonna have not good interviews, but good interviews all within the same institution, right? A lot depends on the other person in front of us, but not let that sort of carry over into the next one. I think is a really good point. And then Maria, you're back. Same question. What are some of the lessons you learned, some of the surprises, some of the things that you wish you knew, like some of the things you know now that you wish you knew then, type of thing?
Yeah, sorry that, I had traffic challenges and signal. So I just want to catch up. So I did I went to medical school in Colombia. at a better university than my colleagues here from Colombia. Of course, I'm joking, but no, I'm from Medellin. So I did my residency at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and I did my fellowship in New York. So one of the things that we look in our program, it's that if the resident is going to be a good match into our program in terms of personality, motivation, and also what is the reason why they want to go, for instance, to Miami, because it's a very, Hispanic, multicultural, and probably like with New Mexico, it doesn't mean that it has to be somebody who speaks Spanish, but somebody who's willing and motivated to work with the community, because we have a diverse community, underserved community. We also have a private hospital. So somebody who really shows interest in going to our program and is motivated and want to learn about our program and being genuine as well. And one of the things that I wish I knew before I got into a program, to be honest, I think I cannot think of anything in particular. I think the process, I was in a very supportive program and it was great. So no, I think that just being genuine, as everybody has said before.
Can I bring up something about being genuine and the context of culture? Because remember, we are applying, you guys are applying for a residency in the United States. So many of the people who are going to interview you are Americans, not necessarily Hispanics, right? So you have to know also your audience. So you probably, even though you are genuine, you do want to tailor your responses in a way to who you are interviewing with, right? So culturally, we are good at showing emotion, sometimes being very verbose and poetic in our answers, and that also reflected in personal statements sometimes too. Americans are not very good at that. They usually don't like it too much when we do a lot of beauty stuff and we don't get to the point sort of concretely. They like to go where the money is, right? So you want to avoid that sort of I don't know, I don't think avoid, but just be aware of that, right? Sometimes they may see your responses as it may be a little bit superficial and a little colorful, but perhaps lacking some of the content, right? So I don't know how to, this is trying to be very concrete, yes, genuine, all the stuff is great, but also be concrete that, data talks more than talking, talk is cheap, right? Talking, you can say very beautiful things. Most people are going to say, yeah, I want to do psychiatry because I love people. I like talking to people. I feel I can understand them very well, and everybody's going to say that. So if you say that, you're not going to be very different from anybody else, right? So you have to be careful about those cliche answers, if you will, right? And so I do suggest whenever you have the opportunity, show your hardcore data, your evidence of what you have done. And I'm going to bring the cultural aspect too, because as a culture, we tend to be very shy about talking about accomplishments. We feel embarrassed when we say we did this, we did that, because we are not supposed to say that. But we may be called narcissistic in our cultures if we talk about our accomplishments. Americans don't. They are very good at very concretely speak about their accomplishments. I've done this, I've done that. So there's a way to say that without coming across as narcissistic. So you don't want to undersell yourself, right? You have to say very clearly and very concretely what you have done, being proud without being overly sort of too much. And I think that's very important in the interview too.
And just a bit, I want to get to Juliana and Mauricio, but just to that point, I really want to highlight it because it is something, yes, that is a struggle. And I think that, Juan pointed out, I experience it too, right? We tend to be verbose. And so we tend to add a lot of details to things that may not need it, which is fine. And is part of us, but understanding what that balance is, giving enough detail and just enough and not more. But then also that delicate balance of modesty versus narcissism, for lack of a better term, right? And so how to say that, and I think it gets back to what Bladimir said. It was in the practice, right? Practicing how you can do this without seeming like a narcissist, without giving overly verbose, overly detailed answers that they don't want. Well, Juliana, you had your hand up. You want to say something?
Yes, I have a comment about that and about what Juan was mentioning about being genuine but I think the key of being genuine is also knowing who are you talking to. So get to know the people who are interviewing you. I know that some people just get their schedule for the interview maybe a day before, a night before. But if it's possible, just Google that person, see what they have done, maybe try to figure out or have a mental idea of what that person likes and how that person minds work. And also don't underestimate the residents, because the residents, especially in our program, I think they're kind of the toughest filter, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, they are the ones that detect like the difficult personalities, the people who are maybe having some trouble, or like the more narcissistic ones, or so don't underestimate talking to a resident. Try to befriend a resident, try to of that specific program, try to communicate with them, because those are going to be your colleagues in the future, in the program and after you graduate. So I just have those two comments too.
Thank you. Mauricio? You're muted.
I agree with what my colleagues have said, the different things, be genuine, know your audience. I agree with all of those things, but let me give you a perspective as an administrator. And actually, one of the things that Juliana mentioned, I think it's key, get to know who's going to be interviewing you. If you're an interviewer and people know what you've done, maybe it's our own our own needs, it feels good. But do it also for the university. I have to build a team, okay? I need to make sure that this resident fits, is a good player. It's a team sport. And is this resident the right person for us? Many times what I tell folks is that, yeah, it's fine if you graduate from Princeton or the University of Mars, wherever, but what really matters, is it going to be a good fit? And I think if you're very interested in a program, you really should do your homework. Same as Juliana mentioned, know your interviewers, but know the program. Let's say, I'm not saying just say what they hope you would say, but let's say your interest is in substance use disorders. Make sure that you really know what is on in that program and emphasize it. The other key thing is we all like nice people. We all do. And Juliana mentioned the residents, absolutely, but also the staff. Actually, what I do as administrator, and I ask all the interviews, what do you think of this and that person? I always ask the staff, was this a nice person or not? And actually, I can tell you there's been times that there's been great candidates who were not nice to staff. We don't like having folks like that here. So get to know your team, do your homework, and be, as many people have mentioned, be genuine. If the interest, if the place is not of your interest, maybe not even apply. But make sure you're a good fit, because that's what us administrators look for. Is this going to be a good player for our team? Back to you, Danny.
And so, Mauricio, what you said, I think, is really, really important, because number one, I think the staff have even more insight than we do, because they see how people are in a way that we don't. So the staff comment, I think, is really, really important. And then the other bit, right, about just knowing the places that you're interviewing at. One of the things that has really stood out to me is, on a couple of occasions, I was asked, "Can you interview this candidate?" And then the reason I was asked to interview the candidate was because the applicant, specifically asked that I interview them. but that I am part of it because they had read my work, they had read, they had a similar research interest or whatever. But like the handful of people that have done that, I remembered them, and it's like, wow, they really now you really did your homework. And so that's and that's a way to make it's really stand out, but in a genuine way, right? Because I'm like, I don't do substance abuse, right? So I would not have gone, like, if I was interviewing, I wouldn't have gone to Gustavo and be like, I want to interview with Gustavo, because then that would have not been me. But if your interest is in substance abuse, talk to Gustavo, right? The request an interview, I think, goes a long way. To that point too, Vladimir, when you were interviewing, did you get a list like the day before, a few days before, of who you were going to interview with, like the faculty?
Yeah, so for the majority, I would get interviews, especially if they were like on Thalamus, the platform Thalamus. It will tell you like this specific hour is your interview one, this specific hour is your interview two, and then it'll tell you the faculty that you're most likely going to be interviewing with. Of course, the day of, sometimes there might be a shuffle based on availability, but for the most part, you were always able to know who you were going to interview with. And so a few days before or the day before, I would look up the person I'm interviewing with, kind of see what department they're in, what are they doing exactly, and kind of just learn a little bit more about the person I was going to be talking with. I think that helped with easing some of the nerves because you can see a picture of the face. You don't have to kind of, I think that helps to put you at ease that you kind of know who's going to be across the screen from you a little bit. And then sometimes when you answer all the questions, they leave some space at the end of every interview for you to ask some questions. And so you can kind of start formulating some questions you want to tailor that are specific to the interviewer that you're going to be paired with for the hour.
Okay. So that's good to know, right? Like that just adds to, you doing the homework, so that allows you to stand out more so than somebody who's just there because, like, oh, you got the interview and you didn't bother doing the legwork on the back on the front end. Um, I I wanted to open it up to everybody. Now we talked about like what advice, right? Like what are the things they can be doing? But this is open to everyone, so anyone who wants to answer, just jump in. What are some common mistakes that you see applicants make during the interview, whether it's in their responses, their body language, maybe how they're dressed, follow-up communication, whatever. But like, what are some mistakes that you see so that it's good to know what to do, but it's also good to know what not to do?
I would say don't push it too hard. Don't try too hard. It's like dating, right? So you try to impress too much or try to show off too much, people will notice.
Right. Not try too hard. That's funny. That's good.
But also the opposite as well. I mean, if it's somebody who has like really flat affect that really is not showing any interest in the program, is the answers are very monosyllables, that they don't say much. That is also like a red flag, because you kind of like start ask I interview for fellowship in residency, like why are you even interviewing if there's like no interest in the program or what we do, or yeah, so show interest.
Let me share something that I do. I don't do a lot of interviews, but at the end of the day, I meet with a group, actually to do marketing about our department. And I always ask them a question: why are you interested in New Mexico or UNM? And also, what concerns do you have? And the ones that I'm going to remember are those who express very thoughtful concerns. So again, I'm going to repeat it: do your homework, know where you're going. And what are and also find out issues that you think could be improved in that particular program. Because if you provide that information to someone who wants to improve the program, it'll be very well received. And
good point. Gustavo, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say something about that resonates with what Juan was saying in terms of, I think there is a right balance in terms of the doing the homework as it pertains to the interview. Like on several occasions, what the interviewers may say is it looks too rehearsed or too robotic, and so I think it is good to to have that spontaneity, or to be able to like sometimes you practice an answer like 200 times and it comes like you are reading something from like an AI, then they will be like, oh, I thought they were looking at something at the screen, or it looks too robotic to rehearse. So I will just be mindful about that right level of preparation. Yeah.
And Juliana?
Yeah, same comment here. For me, it's like the ones that I don't think do that well are the ones that kind of rehearse the answers. The answers sound too generic. They're eloquent. They speak very well, but they're like kind of generic, rehearsed, and they sound almost like beauty queen responses. Like the perfectly polite, perfectly politically correct response. Don't worry if you create controversy or something, but I think, or even if you startle, or if you feel like a little bit like you have doubts and you look up, or you move your hands, but be more natural during the interview, basically.
So Alejandra from the audience, she wrote, thank you all for the great advice. What are your thoughts on thank you emails or post-interview emails?
I like them. I think it depends also how was the connection during the interview, because if the connection wasn't that good, the thank you email sometimes feels a little like an obligation. But if there was a good connection, I think you can mention something about that connection in the little email saying, hey, I love I don't know, I remember I have someone in common, or I something that you could share with that person so that person remembers you.
Anyone else, any thoughts on the thank you emails or anything post-interview email?
No, I think as Juliana said, formality will kill, the whole thing. So if you wanna reply, say something meaningful that it definitely happened during the interview. Otherwise, thank you for the interview, blah blah blah. Yeah, it doesn't take you anywhere.
Okay. And so for applicants that have had gaps, or gaps in their applications, or maybe like their scores aren't as strong as some of the others, what advice would you give them? Because like Mauricio said, there are more applicants than spots, so you're trying to get to everything, but then sometimes like in those metrics, they may not be relative to your peers that are applying, they may not be as high. So how, what would be some advice that you would give those folks?
I think for me, and I think after kind of looking over this topic for about 2 years, there's kind of two ways you can go about it. You can either address the things from the front end and just kind of give your thoughts on it, and how you've improved. And then there's the other aspect where you can just focus on your positives. If we're kind of considering it, we're at the point of the interview, then that's giving the perspective that they've already seen your application, they've seen this red flag, but they've still decided to interview you. And so I would think from that perspective, if we're going into the interview and they decided to interview me despite knowing like any red flags or anything that you had to address in the interview, I think if I got to the interview at that point, I would just want to focus on highlighting my strengths so that I'm not associating myself constantly with this part of my application that I'm trying to get over this hump and trying to leave it behind me. So in my perspective, I would kind of focus more on my positive sides and my strengths rather than trying to address it unprompted. Of course, if they bring it up during the interview, you're going to have to address it. But I always try to give the percentage of, spend 15% of your time explaining what happened and the reason, and the rest of the time explaining how you grew, and then how, and focusing on your strengths, because the less time you're spending on the negative side, the person's able to walk away with a more positive light from your interaction.
That's a good point. Being able to pivot, acknowledge, but then pivot.
And I would say I would use that as a strength, because in most cases these gaps are not you were not just watching TV for 3 years, right? Most of the time is something that made you have a gap, and most of the times is because you have to work, because you don't have the funds to be able to come to the US and be independent. So they will see more as a resilience, stories of resiliency, how you were able to overcome all the challenges inherent to IMGs. That is not the same as being an American applicant. So I will just make it a way, an opportunity to show how courageous and that you've been to trying to overcome all these challenges. And then the gap is just the explanation of that.
And to your point, Juan, about resilience, the residency, the interviews, it's a long season. It's draining. It can be emotionally draining, and you have to deal with rejections. That's just a natural part of the process. So how would you, committee, the panel, how would you advise applicants to stay resilient throughout this process in the face of many rejections? And so what are things that they can do to bolster their resilience, to make sure that they still keep going?
Perseverance is the key. I think keep going, keep trying. Show possible solutions to a problem. For example, if you have a low score in the step 2, because now the step 1 they don't see your score, but if you have a low score in the step 2, maybe offer them or mention or try to plan ahead and say, hey, I'm planning to take the step 3 before I enter the internship. Because one of, for example, in our program, one of the challenges is like if someone doesn't pass the step 3, that means that person cannot get their license. So it's a hassle for the program. So if the program knows that person is, the main issue with the scores is like they're afraid they won't pass the licensing exam, the step 3. But if someone says, hey, I'm preparing and I'm trying to do the best but to improve my scores in the step 3, or I'm planning to take it sooner, like before I enter internship, I think that will give some relief to the person that is interviewing this applicant.
Actually, not having passed the 3 is a big challenge for programs, because if the individual doesn't pass the 3, then you cannot hire you're stuck with an empty position. So just to be transparent, we really are very careful about that, especially with someone who has not done that well in the previous exams. It's a big risk that the programs usually don't take. I'm sure some do, but keep that in mind.
I think the other part about like if there are rejections, if a program says no, sorry, we cannot invite you for interview, or anything that looks like bad news, I think it is good to develop that introspection about how those news are affecting you. So you are more mindful about your affect and how you come across in the interview, because you may be down because a program said no, but then the interviewer may read that as like, oh, you look very flat, you didn't seem interested, and you may be super interested in the program, but you're just coming by that news that said, no, we cannot invite you. So just having that introspection about how is your mood and how are you feeling, and just being very mindful about that when you are interacting with folks.
I have met applicants who have been rejected to, several years in a row, and then they persevere and they try to build their CV, they try to do research, they volunteer, and they ended up getting into residency. So now psychiatry became extremely competitive. So it is harder for us, but usually like for medical graduates, they're pretty strong. I mean, they show their resilience and what you have done to get where you're at, because it's not the same path as American graduates. So you leave the country, you have to do extra rotations. So talk about that as well during your interview.
And just I want to be mindful of the time. It's 5 till the top of the hour, so please, the people in the audience, please ask the questions. We don't have a whole lot of time left. So if there is something that we have not discussed, please by all means do so. Put it in the chat, and we'll ask it. I do want to get back to something, Mauricio, you said very much at the beginning, and it was about culture, right? And finding the fit. And there can be cultural bias in the selection process. Um, and it and also, and I've seen this right at our institution, particularly towards IMGs. So what can departments and selection committees, what can they do to recognize this and also to mitigate it? That was a question to you, Mauricio.
Well, I think it's actually getting tough because as I'm sure you all heard that to get a H-1 visa, the individual or the institution has to pay $100,000. So keep that in mind. I think things are getting tougher. Not to end with a hard note, but things are getting difficult. So I think what I would advise is just what you bring to the program, and I can tell you, people are going to be thinking, if I'm going to get this resident, I'm going to have problems with the visa. That's going to be an additional challenge. Not sure how to address it. Because in fact, I'm not sure if the individual, let's say, is financially wealthy. I think it has to be the institution who pays for it.
Wow.
So there's a lot of concerns going on. So just say what you bring to the table.
Right, and I think that is something that is out of your control. That's out of our control, right? And you can only control what's in front of you, and that's what you are doing, what you are bringing to the table, how you're communicating, and it's easy to get caught up in that, but that's out of your hands. And so what you present is what you can control, and then the department has to make their decisions on that. We just have a couple minutes left. I want to throw it out to the panelists. Is there something that we have not talked about that you feel really needs to be said? Some last bits of wisdom, some little pearls of wisdom that you feel that has not been shared that would benefit the people listening.
I would say use your contacts, not the people that you know, because that's key. If you have friends or friends of a friend in that program, use that people, because otherwise it'll be easier that they forget about you in the huge pile of applications. So yeah, reach out to people and do that.
Networking.
But also recommend just remembering to be proud of yourself while you're in this process. I think when you're an applicant, you can kind of get into this mindset that, I need to impress this program. I need to show them what I'm worth. And I think that can kind of get you into the mindset where you're asking for validation, and that can get you, very scared and worried in some of your responses. And sometimes that comes across in your affect and how you answer questions. So I think learning to switch your mindset to show that, I'm proud of what I've achieved. I'm proud of how far I've come. And when I would get difficult questions, I almost really welcomed them on the interview trail, because I always saw it as an opportunity to show them how proud I was, instead of me having to be like, please take me to your program. Let me show you how much I'm worth. I would kind of shift the mindset to be like, let me show you why I'm so proud of myself. And I think if you're able to remember that throughout the process, I think you stop leaning more on the validation of getting the interview or getting any rejections, and really focusing on your strengths while you're in this process, which can be very, very long. It can really take a toll on your mental health. So just remember to be proud of yourself. Remember to remember how far you've come to get to this point, and I think that'll help you serve you well as you kind of go through this process.
Yeah, that's a
And
good point, right?
show that you're a good team player. That is key, because the interviewer is going to think, what is this person bringing to our program? Are they a team player or not? That is key. And also, we immigrants have a reputation of being hardworking. Emphasize that, and we are.
Yeah. And I
lean
would
in on
say
it, right?
I want to also talk about humor. I know it's hard to make jokes during these interviews because you're not in that, but people will remember if there were a funny interaction between you and the interviewer. So learn to make fun of yourself because you cannot make fun of the interviewer. But if you are able to kind of laugh about yourself. So I was remembering before when I messed up in this answer, if I would have said, "Oh man, I got that wrong," right? And I started laughing, it would have kind of dissipate all the tension and all the stress, right? So kind of and then he probably would have remembered that he didn't take himself too seriously. He's able to laugh about himself and roll with the punches, right? So I think it's a good trait to have as a resident as well.
Self-deprecating humor goes a long way. And
But also, if you're going to talk about a book, make sure that you got the right author.
That's a good point, Maria. And just to get back to Vladimir's point, remember that the number of people that are in your position is very, 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 very small. You are a fraction of a percent in the entire, like if you, no matter where, right? Like if you take it out globally, you take it out locally, doesn't matter. You are a fraction of a percent in terms of where you are. So always keep that in mind. Juliana, you wanted to say something?
No, it's the same. You pass the first filter. So always remember that. Someone read your application and got interested.
All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your participation. I hope that this was really helpful. I want to thank the panelists for taking the time to do this, to answer the questions, and to be here. And if any of you have any questions beyond this, please, by all means, reach out. You can email us in the society, and we can help you in one way or another. Juan, you wanted to say something? You're not on mute.
I know I was gonna say thank you, MC Danny. That's it.
No, thank you.
Also, if anyone has any feedback about this panel or any future, if you're interested in it, would like the society to do something, or any feedback would be greatly appreciated.
Yes, absolutely. Your voice really, really counts. Please, by all means, your voice is of the utmost importance. We want to make sure that we are listening to you, that we are providing a service that is meaningful to you, and we are helping you. So please, by all means, let us know if this or anything else that is coming down that you think merits a discussion, or that you would like more information on. Please reach out to us. And I do want to point out the recording of this, as well as a slide deck with more information about the process that programs use, and some questions that faculty asked, but also questions that applicants asked, that'll be available on our website. Okay. All right. And so with that, I will let you all go. Have a wonderful and happy Halloween. Be safe. And hopefully we will all see you in residency in one way or another, in one program or another.
And maybe we'll see them at the American Society of Hispanic Psychiatry meeting.
Yes, absolutely.
And become a member.
The Friday and Saturday before APA in May 2026. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Gracias.